Hi, my name is Bob. I'm one of the contributors to the Jetzig web framework. Today I'm going to be talking about Zmpl, which is the templating language used by Jetzig. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just create a new project. We'll call it Zmpl example. And then we'll go into that directory and we'll create a view. And we'll call that view iguanas. And you can see it's created two files, an index.zmpl and iguanas.zig. So that's the template and the view module. So we'll start the server, and then while that's compiling, we'll have a look at the content that's been created for us. So we've got iguanas.zig, and this just receives the request itself and data. We'll cover that in a moment. And at the moment, all it does is just return a request.render OK. So it's just going to return a 200 OK response. And then we'll look at the template that we've created. At the moment, it's just some example content, nothing really interesting here. And then the server's started up, so I can go and look at this in my web browser. First of all, we'll look up to the default landing page. So this just comes with every project that you create with Jetzig. And then we'll go to iguanas, and the routing is automatically done for us, so we can just go straight there, and we can see that that content is already there. So the way that Zmpl works is it's a modal templating language. So it has three primary modes, which are HTML, Zig, and Markdown. And the default mode is always HTML. Now the way that you switch mode is by going using the @ symbol and then specifying the mode name and then using curly braces as delimiters. So if we save that, what we should see is completely identical output because we've switched to the HTML mode explicitly, but that's already the default mode. Now while that's compiling, I just want to show you what the compiled template actually looks like. So this is an auto-generated file by Zmpl. I'm just going to reformat that. So what we can see here is that every single template is actually compiled down into a Zig function. So we can see here that it's writing the default content, and everything else is just stuff that's needed for Zmpl to work. But what that means is that every time we render a template, all that's happening is that we're calling a Zig function. So we're letting Zig do all of the optimization and all of the hard work for us. So that's finished recompiling, and you can see here that the content is identical because we've just switched explicitly to the HTML mode. But now we can do something a bit more interesting. We can switch to the Zig mode. And we can just do something like if 1 is greater than 2, then display the original content, else we're going to display something like 1 is less than 2. We can recompile that. And as you can see here, we're just switching to Zig mode. And one important thing to know about Zig mode, it's really simple, is that if the line starts with an opening triangle bracket, then it's considered as HTML, and that just gets rendered as HTML, and everything else gets rendered as Zig. So if we look at the rendered manifest again, and what we can see here is that this function now has some Zig code in it. So we're not doing anything special here, we're not parsing the Zig code and doing any magic with it. We don't have our own templating logic language, we're just using pure Zig. So that Zig gets injected directly into the Zig function, and then we can see here we've got the if, we've got the else, and the closing brace. And everything else that happens in between is Zmpl's generating more Zig code to write the actual output. So that's finished compiling, so if we look at that, we can confirm that 1 is less than 2. So we can do some more interesting stuff here. So we can, for example, do equals hello. And then we can use Zmpl's reference syntax, which is double curly braces. We're going to make a typo here. We're going to put bar instead of foo. And then we're going to try and render it. And we get an error. We're saying that we're trying to use an undeclared identifier bar because the variable name is actually foo. So if we change that back to foo, and then we can see it's detected the changes and it's restarting the server, so it's recompiling in the background. We don't have an error, and the errors come back pretty quickly. And all of these errors are just coming directly from Zig because, as you've seen before over here, this is just regular Zig code. So we're letting Zig do all of the hard work for us with all of the debugging. So we've recompiled that, and we're not displaying the content because 1 is still less than 2, so let's switch that around. Okay, so we'll wait for that to reload. And we can do any kind of zig code here, like I say, because this is just being rendered directly into a function. Basically any zig code that you could write in a function you can put here. And you also have an allocator available in every single function. So if you need to do any allocation inside your template, maybe it's a bit of an unusual thing to do, but you have an allocator there ready to go. So allocator is already there as a ready to use tool there. And that's an arena allocator, so you don't need to do any deallocations. That's automatically done for you. Now if we refresh that, you can see content codes here, and we have hello. So this matches what we're expecting here. Okay. So we have another mode, which is Markdown mode. And as you can guess, this is just some Markdown. We'll do a list. And we can do numbered lists. And we can do a little link. Okay, so the way that Markdown mode works is it just parses the Markdown content using Zmd, which is a pure Zig Markdown library written specifically for the Jetzig web framework. And some interesting things about the way that Markdown mode works, which I'll show you in a second. So as you can see here, we've got some expected Markdown, nothing very interesting, but it's rendered as we expect. Now, if we go to the source main of the project that we've created, and we go down to in Jetzig options, we have this Markdown fragments const, and you can see here that we've got complete control over exactly how all of the Markdown is rendered. So we've got the H1, H2, and we're controlling exactly how that is rendered by specifying a 2-item array, which is the open and close tags. So if we look at the actual source here, we don't have Tailwind available at the moment, but you can see that the classes are there. And one really interesting thing about this is that you can also specify a function. So you can either specify these as consts of 2-item arrays or as functions. Every function receives an allocator and the Markdown node. And then you can use this to excuse me, you can use this to generate any kind of more dynamic Markdown. So block syntax is really interesting because here we're specifying the language that we're using here. So if you're using a code block, then the meta is this bit here. So you've got access to that, and you can use that to generate some more dynamic HTML that you wouldn't be able to otherwise do with just an open and a close tag. Okay, so that's Markdown mode. And now we're just going to go into references a bit more. So I'm going to change that. Okay, so if we go back to where we were here, so when you want to use a reference in Zmpl, you use these open and close double curly braces, and you can do some quite interesting things with it. One thing you can also do if you want as well is you can do some zig code here. And as long as this zig code evaluates to a string or a constituent array, then it can render directly inside the curly braces here. So we'll just wait for that to finish reloading, and we'll just do a quick reload to make sure that that's displaying as we expect. Cool. Okay, and then there you can see we've got that string that we expected there. So like I say, as long as this evaluates to a string, you can put pretty much any zig code you want here within reason, but probably best reserved for just small snippets. Okay, so this is just using the basic sort of using local variables and constants inside the references, but we're going to add some data to our view. So first we'll create a new root data object. And remember, the first call to data.object or data.array becomes the root object. Now we're going to put a little value in here, and we'll make it a string, make it a bit more interesting than the others. Cool, save that, and then we'll refer to that here. We'll just get rid of this logic here, it's not really very helpful at the moment. Okay, so foobar is, and then we'll just refer to this. Now you notice here we're using a dot prefix. So if I just open this over here, so we've called our value foobar, and this is in the root data object. Oh, we've got a failure. Sorry, I forgot to put a try. Cool, that looks better. So yeah, we've got our root data object, and this is the first call to object becomes the root data object. And then every reference that we use here is going to be hanging off of that. So if we do .foobar, it's going to be looking in that root data object. And just to kind of cover something I mentioned in the last video, is that if we do iguanas.json, we also get this automatically. So you automatically get the JSON output, and this is why all of these values have to be JSON compatible. So anything that you put into the data, into the root data object, has to be JSON compatible. So you've got strings, you've got booleans, you've got integers, floats, objects, and arrays, and also null if you want. And anything that's JSON compatible can be put into here. So now if we refresh that, foobar is hello, how are you? So just to recap there, if you're using a data lookup, then you need to prefix with a dot, and if you're using a local variable or constant, then you can just omit the dot and it will refer to that automatically. Okay, so we're going to do something a little bit more interesting now. So just to show some nested data, so we're going to create an iguana object, and then we'll put that into the root as iguana, and then we'll give the iguana a name, call it Ziggy. Cool. Then over here, so all we've done here is just create a new iguana. Oh, we've got a failure. Oops. There we go. There we go, cool. So we've got a new object that we've created here, and because this wasn't the first call to data object, this is just dangling, so this isn't attached to anything by default. And then we're putting it into the root data object under the key iguana, and we're just adding it in there. And then we're adding something to it as well. We're adding a name, giving it a name Ziggy, and because this is already attached to the root object, anything that we put after here is also going to be available. So that's finished compiling, and then foobar is Ziggy. So we'll change that to the iguana is Ziggy. Cool. Now we're going to add something else. We'll just give it an age. And this is going to be an integer. We'll save that. And then in here, we'll do we'll save that. Make sure we haven't got any mistakes. Cool. That seems good. And it's detected another change since the last time, because we did 2 separate saves there. So we'll just wait for that to finish compiling. Okay, cool. There we go. The iguana is Ziggy. Ziggy's age is 18, and we'll just inspect the HTML there just to verify that that looks like we want. We should have put a BR here, but you get the idea. Okay, so the next thing we're going to cover is partials. So if you're familiar with frameworks like Rails, a partial is just a template that you use within a template. So we'll just create a new partial in app views, and we'll just put it in the root, and we'll just give it iguana. Now .zmpl. So the way that you create a partial is just prefix the file name with an underscore, and then Zmpl will automatically interpret that as being a partial. So we're just going to copy this code over here, and we're going to save that. And then to render a partial in Zmpl, you use the @ symbol again, and then you specify the partial name. So the partial name is iguana. Cool. Now this isn't going to work. The reason it's not going to work is because we're referring to data values here. So we've created the data values here in the view, and then because this template belongs to that view, it's like the index.zmpl for the index function. All of the data that we set here is automatically available in that template. But with partials, they don't automatically inherit the data belonging to the view function. So if we go back here and we try to render that, we should get an error. So the error is telling us unknown data reference iguana.name. So the way that we solve this with partials is that we like to keep them nice and isolated so that they work completely independently and can be really reusable. Is you can specify an args directive, again using the @ symbol, and then just like any Zig function, you specify the arg name and then a colon and then the type. Now in this case, because these are data references, they have a special type, which is a Zmpl value. So whenever you're using whenever you're passing in a reference, which is a data reference, it's always going to be a Zmpl value, and Zmpl will automatically evaluate that into a string and render it. So now that we've got the name and the age directly, we can just do name here again, and then we can do the same here. Now we just need to pass these in, so we'll do .iguana.name and .iguana.age. So it's kind of pseudo Zig here. This is definitely not Zig, but you can see here we're just passing in these data references as arguments here, and it's just restarting, so just waiting for the server to finish passing. And we've got some errors here, probably because we're referring to things that don't exist, so we just probably had some typos in our Zmpl file, but now that we've rendered that, we've got the iguana is Ziggy, Ziggy's age is 18. Cool. So what we can also do is we can specify a default argument, and we'll do color is green. So the color is green. We'll save that, and then no errors this time, so that's just reloading. And this is where it's slightly diverting from normal Zig syntax. So the args mode line is pretty much pure Zig, but we just grab anything after the equals and treat that as a default argument. So if you don't pass that argument in, then that gets rendered automatically. So Ziggy is a green iguana. And if we wanted to override that, then we can do yellow, and you can see it's restarting again, and we'll just wait for that to finish reloading. And yeah, I mean, here it's interesting to note that we're using a const u8 because we're passing in a raw string here. So the way that you use Zmpl value and any kind of const u8, or we actually coerce quite a few different types to strings, so you can be pretty liberal here. You can use like integers, floats, and basically anything that's compatible with Zmpl. It will do its best to try and coerce that into a string. That's finished reloading, and Ziggy is now a yellow iguana. So this is really useful. For example, one way that I use this a lot is I have a link partial, and I'll do like href is const u8, and title is const u8, and then I'll do target, also a const u8. I'll set the default target to self, and then you can do something like that, and then we can also do target equals target. And I find that really useful if you're just if you know, obviously we'll have some like extra styling and all of that kind of stuff in here, but I find this really useful if you want to have a really standardized link with any kind of classes attached to it that you want. And then if you want to specify a different target, so for example underscore blank, then you can just specify that by passing it as the third argument, which is completely optional. Okay, and then the final thing that I want to cover here, we'll just revert this code back here. Cool. Is partial slots, which are a really useful way of passing in extra elements to a partial. Slots is taken from Svelte, but you may also know this as children or various other names. So the way that slots work is that you have way of passing in lines of code of HTML to a partial. So you just use curly braces to delimit the slots. Then each line is considered a separate slot. So this is the slot number 1, and we'll just copy that a few times. Cool. And then here, the way that we use the slots is we can just go into Zig mode. And then slots is just automatically available as a local variable in Zig mode. So we can just do for slots. It's just an array of const u8, an array of const u8. And then we can just render that slot inside a div here. There we go. Make sure we haven't got any errors. Looks good. Cool. And yeah, all this will do is just iterate over the slots and render them wrapped in a div. It's not very useful because we've already got these as divs, but you know, just as an example. And once that's finished loading, cool, you can see that we've got our slots there as well. And if we look at the HTML, you can see that each of these slots is a div wrapped in a div. And if you don't need to wrap each slot in anything special, then you can actually bypass all of this and just do, this is going to be like my slots div, and then you can just refer to slots directly and save that. And you know, like I said, Zmpl makes quite a lot of effort to coerce things into an appropriate type. So if you pass it an array of strings, it will actually automatically iterate over that array and render that for you as well. So because slots is just a really basic array of strings, then that will automatically get rendered, and you get identical contact output. Sorry. And you can also use, for example, you can use references within these slots. So if we wanted to change that there, then before this gets passed to the partial, all of these references are resolved and evaluated, and then the partial is just going to render that as a regular string. So you can put anything that you would normally put in a reference here as well. It's just the same syntax. So we'll refresh that, and then one of our slots is now Ziggy. Okay. I think that's pretty much it for what we wanted to cover in Zmpl. As you can see, there's quite a lot to it, and there's quite decent documentation these days, so we've actually got quite a lot of the stuff covered here. You've got all the different modes that you can use. There's an explanation of references, so it's going to have a bit more detail than everything I've covered here. And you've got information about partials, including slots down at the bottom here as well. And there's a lot more information about Jetzig's data types. So there's much more information here if you want to have a look. And as always, if you'd like to donate to the Zig Software Foundation, please do. I'm sure it would be much appreciated. And as you can see, we're like 1 star away from getting 200. So if you want to give us a star on github.com, Jetzig framework, Jetzig, then please feel free to do that as well. Okay, that's all. Thanks a lot. Have a good day. Bye.